The bullet shattered the champagne flute in Luca Moretti's hand before Elena even heard the shot. Glass and expensive liquor exploded across his perfectly tailored tuxedo as he moved, faster than she thought possible, pulling her against his chest and down behind the marble bar. His heart thundered against her cheek. His hand cradled her head with unexpected gentleness even as armed men flooded the ballroom. "Don't scream," he whispered, his lips against her ear. "They can't know you matter to me." But it was already too late. Someone had seen them dancing, someone new, and Elena Carter's ordinary life had just ended. Want to see how Elena survives the world she never asked to enter? Stay until the end, hit that like button, and comment your city below so I can see how far this story travels. 3 hours earlier, Elena had been ready to leave before she even arrived. The invitation had come through her former roommate, Jessica, who worked in event planning and always had spare tickets to galas she couldn't fill. "It's at the Fairmont," Jessica had said over the phone, her voice carrying that bright, persuasive tone that meant she needed a favor. "Open bar, fancy people? Maybe some networking opportunities? You keep saying you need connections for your writing." What Jessica really meant was that she needed bodies to fill seats, and Elena was desperate enough to accept charity disguised as opportunity. Now, standing in the gilded ballroom of the Fairmont Copley Plaza, Elena felt the full weight of her mistake. Her dress, a simple black number from a consignment shop that had seemed elegant in her apartment mirror, looked painfully plain among the designer gowns that shimmered under crystal chandeliers. Emeralds glittered at women's throats. Diamonds caught the light with every casual gesture. The air itself seemed expensive, perfumed with money and privilege. Elena clutched her small purse and edged toward the bar, calculating how long she needed to stay before she could slip out without Jessica noticing. 20 minutes, she decided. Maybe 30 if the wine was decent. "Champagne?" The bartender was already pouring before she answered. "Thank you." Elena took the flute and retreated to the edge of the room, positioning herself near a marble column where she could observe without being observed. Or so she thought. The charity gala, something about funding arts programs in underserved communities, had drawn Boston's elite like moths to flame. Elena recognized faces from business magazines and society pages. Real estate developers, tech entrepreneurs, old money families whose names graced hospital wings and university buildings. They moved through the space with the easy confidence of people who belonged, who had always belonged, who couldn't imagine not belonging. She took a long sip of champagne and wondered, not for the first time, what she was doing with her life. 28 years old, English degree from a state school, 3 chapters of a novel she was too afraid to finish, $12,000 in credit card debt. Recently unemployed after the literary magazine she'd worked for folded. Living in a studio apartment in Allston with a radiator that clanked like a prisoner rattling chains. The champagne was excellent. She took another sip. "You look like you're planning an escape." Elena turned to find a woman in her 50s, elegant in slate blue silk, regarding her with amused eyes. Is it that obvious? Only to someone who's felt the same way. The woman extended a hand. "Margaret Hastings." "Elena Carter." They shook hands and Elena felt marginally less alone. "I'm here with a friend who works for the event company. Well, former roommate. I don't really know anyone." "Then you're braver than most," Margaret said. "Half these people have known each other since prep school and still look terrified at these things. The secret is finding the interesting people." She nodded toward the crowd. "They're rarely the ones doing the most talking." "Who are the interesting people?" Margaret's eyes sparkled. "The ones who look like they'd rather be anywhere else but are too polite to leave, like you. Or—" She paused, her gaze shifting to something across the room. "Like him." Elena followed her line of sight and felt her breath catch. He stood near the far wall, slightly apart from a cluster of men in expensive suits who seemed to orbit him like planets around a sun. Tall, perhaps 6'2", with dark hair swept back from a face that looked carved from stone. All sharp angles and controlled intensity. His tuxedo fit perfectly, custom-made, but he wore it with the ease of someone who didn't notice such things. What struck Elena most was his absolute stillness. While everyone else gestured, laughed, performed, he simply stood and observed, and he was looking directly at her. Elena's stomach flipped. She looked away quickly, heat rising to her cheeks. "That's Luca Moretti," Margaret said quietly. Real estate, mostly. Development projects throughout New England. He funds this event every year. He doesn't look very charitable, Elena said before she could stop herself. Margaret laughed, a genuine sound that made several nearby heads turn. No, I suppose he doesn't, but appearances can be deceiving. She squeezed Elena's arm. Enjoy the evening, dear, and don't leave too quickly. You never know what might happen. Before Elena could respond, Margaret had glided away into the crowd, leaving her alone again. She risked another glance toward the far wall. He was still watching her. The rational part of Elena's brain told her to look away, to move, to find Jessica, and make polite excuses and go home where she belonged. But something kept her frozen in place, champagne flute raised halfway to her lips, trapped in the gravity of his attention. Then he moved, not toward her, not yet, but his body shifted slightly, and one of the men in his orbit leaned in to speak. Luca's eyes never left Elena's face as he listened, nodded once, and said something that made the other man step back quickly. The dismissal was absolute. Elena's heart hammered against her ribs. This was ridiculous. She didn't know this man. He was probably looking at someone behind her, or through her, or not actually looking at all, but simply staring into space the way people did at boring events. But then he began walking toward her, and Elena knew with absolute certainty that she was not mistaken. His movement through the crowd created ripples. People noticed. Conversations paused mid-sentence. Eyes followed his path across the ballroom with barely concealed interest. Elena wanted to run. She wanted to disappear into the marble floor. She wanted to know why her entire body felt electrified, every nerve alive and waiting. He stopped 3 feet away. Up close, he was even more striking. Dark eyes that held depth she couldn't read, olive skin, a mouth that looked like it rarely smiled. There was a scar, faint and white, cutting through his left eyebrow. "You're not enjoying yourself." His voice was low, slightly rough, with the barest trace of an accent she couldn't place. Italian, maybe, worn smooth by years in America. Elena blinked. What? "The party. You look like you're counting minutes until you can leave." A ghost of amusement touched his features. "I'm doing the same thing." "Then why are you here?" The words came out more boldly than she intended. "Obligation." He tilted his head slightly, studying her. "And you?" "Charity. The desperate kind, not the tax-deductible kind." That earned her something that might have been a smile. "Honest. That's rare in this room." "I don't really belong in this room." "No," he agreed. "You don't." Elena felt the words like a slap, her embarrassment flaring into indignation. "Well, thank you for confirming what I already—" "You misunderstand." He took a step closer, and Elena caught the scent of expensive cologne and something else, something darker. "I meant, you're too real for this room. These people—" He gestured dismissively at the glittering crowd. "They perform. You don't." "You don't know anything about me. I know you've been standing in the same spot for 20 minutes. I know you're drinking champagne you don't particularly like. I know you've checked your phone twice but haven't actually read anything." His eyes held hers. "And I know that when I started walking toward you, you considered running. Are you always this unsettling?" "Yes." Elena laughed. She couldn't help it, and something in his expression shifted, softened. "Dance with me," he said. "I don't know you." "Luca Moretti." He extended his hand. "Now you do." Elena looked at his hand, broad and strong, and felt the weight of the moment. Every instinct screamed that this was a threshold, that taking his hand meant stepping into something she couldn't control or predict. The smart thing, the safe thing, would be to make an excuse, to smile politely and decline. Instead, she set down her champagne flute and placed her hand in his. His fingers closed around hers, warm and certain, and he led her onto the dance floor as a string quartet began a waltz. Elena had learned to dance in college, awkward lessons in a community center basement, but she'd never danced like this, in a ballroom, in a crowd, with a man who moved with absolute confidence. Luca's hand settled at her waist, proper and appropriate, yet somehow possessive. "Follow my lead," he murmured. "Bossy." "Yes." They began to move, and Elena forgot to be self-conscious. He led effortlessly, guiding her through the steps with small adjustments of pressure and direction. Around them, other couples danced, but Elena felt their eyes, felt the weight of attention shifting toward them. "They're staring," she whispered. "Let them." Luca's voice was low, meant only for her. "I want them to know who you stand beside." "Why?" Elena looked up at him, genuinely confused. "You don't know me. I'm nobody." Something dangerous flickered in his eyes. "Don't say that again." "It's true. I'm a failed writer with debt and no prospects." "You're—" She gestured vaguely at the opulence surrounding them. "Whatever this is." "You think wealth makes someone significant?" "I think it makes life easier." "Maybe." He turned her smoothly, pulling her closer than strictly necessary. "Or maybe it just changes which problems you have." Elena felt the strength in his arms, the controlled power in the way he moved. "What problems do you have, Luca Moretti?" "Too many to discuss while dancing." His thumb traced a small circle against her waist, the gesture both intimate and careful. "But none of them matter right now." "What matters right now?" He looked at her with an intensity that made her breath catch. You, the way you fit in my arms like you were made for them." Elena's pulse raced. This was insane. She'd met this man 10 minutes ago. But something in his words, in the absolute conviction with which he said them, made her feel seen in a way she'd never experienced. "You're very forward," she managed. "I don't waste time on games." The music swelled, and he turned her again, their bodies moving in perfect synchronization. "I see something I want. I pursue it." "And you want—" "Yes." The single word hung between them, heavy with implication. Elena should have been frightened, should have pulled away, made excuses, fled back to her safe, small life. But instead she felt alive. Electric. Like she'd been sleepwalking through her existence and had suddenly violently woken up. "I don't do this," she said. "I don't meet strange men at parties and what?" Luca's eyes challenged her. "Feel something real? Let yourself want something?" "I don't even know what I want." "Yes, you do. You're just afraid to admit it." The song ended, but they didn't separate immediately. They stood in the center of the dance floor, bodies close, his hand still at her waist, while applause rippled through the ballroom. Elena became aware of the stares again, more intense now, speculative and curious. "People are talking," she said. "Good." Luca's hand slid from her waist, but he kept hold of her fingers. "Come with me. Somewhere quieter." Warning bells rang in Elena's head. "I should probably—" Elena. The way he said her name, like a caress and a command combined, stopped her protests. "Do you trust yourself?" "What kind of question is that?" "The only one that matters. I'm not asking if you trust me. I'm asking if you trust yourself to make your own choices, to walk away if you want to say no if you need to." Elena stared at him, struck by the unexpected wisdom in the question. "Yes, I trust myself." "Then come with me. Talk with me. If at any point you want to leave, I'll have my driver take you home. No questions, no pressure." His thumb brushed across her knuckles. "But I think you're as curious about this as I am." He was right, damn him. Elena was curious, desperately, recklessly curious about this stranger who looked at her like she mattered, who danced with her like she belonged in his arms, who somehow made her feel powerful and desired and fully alive. "Okay," she heard herself say. "Somewhere quieter." Luca's smile was small but genuine, transforming his severe features into something almost beautiful. He led her off the dance floor, his hand a steady anchor at the small of her back. They moved through the crowd, and Elena felt the eyes following them, heard the whispers starting. "Who is she? I've never seen her before." Luca never brings anyone to these events. "Maybe she's a client?" "Don't be naive. Look at how he's touching her." Elena's cheeks burned, but Luca seemed completely unbothered. He guided her through a side door, down a corridor lined with oil paintings, and into a smaller room. A library, perhaps, with floor-to-ceiling bookshelves and comfortable chairs arranged around a fireplace where gas flames danced behind an ornate screen. The door closed behind them, muffling the noise of the party. The sudden quiet felt intimate, almost shocking. "Better?" Luca released her hand but stayed close. "Quieter, anyway." Elena moved toward the bookshelves, needing space to think. The titles ranged from classics to modern literature, architecture books, to poetry collections. Are these yours? The hotels, I imagine. Though I've donated several collections to their library over the years. He watched her trail her fingers along the spines. You like books. I'm a writer. Or trying to be. Elena pulled out a worn copy of Rilke's poems. What about you? Do you read? When I can. Luca moved to a small bar cart in the corner and poured amber liquid into 2 crystal glasses. Poetry, mostly. Philosophy. Things that make me think about beauty instead of business. He brought her a glass, and their fingers brushed in the exchange. Elena took a sip. Whiskey, smooth and expensive, and felt warmth spread through her chest. Why did you really bring me here? She asked. Luca studied her over the rim of his glass. Because out there we were performing. Walked into that ballroom. That I've been watching you for 45 minutes, trying to work up the courage to approach you. Elena nearly choked on her whiskey. Courage? You don't seem like someone who lacks courage. Courage comes in different forms. He set down his glass and took a step closer. I face dangerous men in business deals. I negotiate with people who'd happily see me dead, but approaching a beautiful woman who looks at me like I'm a puzzle to solve, that requires different courage. I'm not beautiful. Elena said it automatically, a reflex born of years of feeling invisible. Luca's expression hardened. Don't contradict me. Excuse me? When I give you a compliment, accept it. Don't diminish yourself. His voice was firm but not unkind. You are beautiful. Your eyes are the color of honey in sunlight. Your mouth? He stopped himself, jaw tightening. I could catalog every detail that makes you stunning, but I think that would embarrass you. Elena's heart hammered. You're very intense. Yes. He picked up his glass again, putting deliberate distance between them. I know, it scares people sometimes. I scare people. Should I be scared? Luca met her eyes. Probably, but not for the reasons you think. What does that mean? He was quiet for a moment, swirling whiskey in his glass. It means I'm not a good man, Elena. I'm not a hero from one of your books. I've done things, made choices that keep me awake at night, but I try... His voice roughened. I try to be better than I was, to build things instead of destroying them, to protect instead of harm. Elena's curiosity deepened. What do you build? Buildings, mostly. Apartments, mixed-use developments, affordable housing projects when the margins work. I fund community centers, arts programs, scholarships. He gestured vaguely toward the door, toward the party beyond. That gala out there. I started it 5 years ago after a friend's daughter lost access to her music lessons because her school cut the program. That's good. That's important work. It's atonement, Luca said quietly, for other work that wasn't good or important. Elena wanted to ask what he meant, but something in his expression stopped her. This was a man carrying weight, bearing scars she couldn't see. She recognized that burden because she carried her own, different, smaller maybe, but no less real. We all have things we regret, she offered. Do you? Luca looked at her with genuine curiosity. What does Elena Carter regret? She should have deflected, made a joke, kept things light. Instead, she found herself answering honestly. Not taking risks, playing it safe. Majoring in something practical instead of creative writing because I was afraid. Taking jobs that paid bills but killed my creativity. Being 28 and feeling like I've already failed at the one thing I wanted to do. You're not a failure. You don't know that. Yes, I do. Luca set down his glass and moved closer, closing the distance between them. Failure is giving up. You haven't given up. You're still trying, still fighting. That's courage, Elena. That's strength. She looked up at him, this strange, intense man who somehow saw past her ordinary exterior to something she'd almost stopped believing existed. Why do you care? Because I recognize you. His hand rose, hesitated, then gently tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. The gesture was so tender it made her chest ache. I see someone who wants more from life than she's been given. Someone who feels trapped in a world too small for her spirit. Someone brave enough to walk into a room where she doesn't belong and stand there anyway. I was ready to leave before you talked to me. But you didn't leave. You stayed. His thumb traced her cheekbone, feather light. You danced with me. You came here with me. You're standing close enough to kiss me, and you haven't stepped away. Elena's breath caught. Is that what you want? To kiss me? Yes. The word was raw, honest. But not yet. Why not? Because when I kiss you, Luca's eyes darkened. When I kiss you, Elena, it won't be something I can take back. It won't be casual or simple. And I need you to understand what you're choosing before that happens. I don't understand anything about this, Elena admitted. I don't understand why you noticed me, why you're saying these things, why I'm still here instead of running away like common sense tells me to. Maybe common sense is overrated, or maybe I'm being reckless. Reckless can be good. His hand slid from her face to her neck, resting there with possessive gentleness. Reckless means you're alive. Reckless means you're feeling instead of thinking. Reckless means the door burst open. A man entered, younger than Luca, dressed in an expensive suit but wearing it with less ease. His eyes swept the room and landed on them, standing close, Luca's hand on Elena's neck. His expression tightened. Luca, we have a problem. Luca's entire demeanor changed. His hand dropped from Elena's neck, his body shifted slightly to place himself between her and the door, and his expression became the cold, unreadable mask she'd first seen across the ballroom. Not now, Marco. It can't wait. Marco's eyes flicked to Elena, dismissive and assessing. Who's she? None of your concern. Luca's voice carried an edge that made Elena's spine stiffen. Give me 5 minutes. We don't have 5 minutes. Constantine is here. Something dangerous flickered across Luca's face. Here? At the gala? In the lobby. He wants to talk. Tell him to make an appointment. He brought 6 men. Marco's jaw tightened. This isn't a request, Luca. It's a message. Elena watched the exchange with growing unease. The temperature in the room seemed to have dropped 20 degrees. Whatever this was about, it wasn't business as usual. Luca turned to her and his expression softened fractionally. Elena, I need to handle this. Can you wait here? What's going on? Business. Complicated business. He glanced at Marco, then back to her. Please, stay here where it's safe. I'll come back as soon as I can. Every instinct told Elena to leave, to take this obvious exit and go home and forget this entire strange, intense evening. But something in Luca's eyes, concern, protection, and beneath it all, a plea, made her nod. Okay, I'll wait. Relief flooded his features. He reached for her hand, brought it to his lips, and pressed a kiss to her knuckles that felt like both promise and apology. Thank you. Then, to Marco. Keep someone outside this door. No one enters. Luca. No one enters. The command was absolute. Marco nodded stiffly, and Luca released Elena's hand with obvious reluctance before following him out. The door closed, and Elena heard the low murmur of voices, footsteps receding. Then silence. She stood alone in the library, heart racing, mind spinning. What had she walked into? Who was Constantine? Why did Luca need 6 men countered by security outside this door? Elena moved to the window and looked out at Boston's glittering skyline. Somewhere below, in the hotel lobby, men were having a conversation that required 6 bodyguards and made Luca's carefully controlled expression crack with something that looked like rage. She should leave. She should walk out of this library, find her coat, and go home to her cramped studio apartment and her safe, predictable life. But Elena stayed. Because despite every warning bell, despite the obvious danger, despite the fact that she'd known Luca Moretti for less than an hour, she wanted to know what happened next. She wanted to see him walk back through that door. She wanted to finish what they'd started. 20 minutes passed, then 30. Elena explored the library, read the spines of books, poured herself another whiskey she didn't drink. Outside, she heard footsteps, voices, but no one tried to enter. When the door finally opened, Elena spun around. Luca stood in the doorway and her breath caught. His tuxedo jacket was gone. His shirt was torn at the collar, and there was blood on his knuckles. Not much, but enough to notice. His expression was dark, dangerous, barely controlled. Are you hurt? Elena moved toward him without thinking. No. He looked at her like a drowning man seeing shore. You're still here. You asked me to wait. People don't usually do what I ask when things get complicated. Elena reached for his hand, turning it over to examine his bloodied knuckles. What happened? A disagreement. Luca's voice was rough. Handled now. This doesn't look handled. You're bleeding. It's not my blood. Elena looked up sharply. Luca met her eyes, and she saw the truth there. He'd hurt someone tonight, maybe badly, and he wasn't apologizing for it. She should run. Everything rational in her screamed to run. Instead, she held his hand gently and said, "There's a bathroom through that door. Let me clean this." Luca stared at her for a long moment. "You're not afraid." "I didn't say that." "But you're not running." "No." Elena tugged his hand gently. "Come on." The bathroom was all marble and gold fixtures, absurdly luxurious. Elena wet a hand towel and carefully cleaned the blood from Luca's knuckles, while he watched her with an expression she couldn't read. "Why?" he asked quietly. "Why what?" "Why are you helping me? Why didn't you leave when you had the chance?" Elena focused on his hand, on the split skin across his knuckles, the bruising already forming. "I don't know. Maybe I'm curious. Maybe I'm foolish. Maybe—" She looked up and found him watching her with devastating intensity. "Maybe I see someone who wants more from life than he's been given too." Luca's free hand rose to cup her face. "I'm dangerous, Elena. What I do, the world I live in, it's not safe. It's not simple. And if you stay—" "I'm not staying," she interrupted, and pain flashed across his features. "I mean, I don't even know what that would mean. We just met. This is crazy. All of this is crazy." "Yes," he agreed, "but I'm not ready to walk away yet." Elena finished cleaning his hand and set down the towel. "Even though I should, even though everything tells me to run, I want to know what happens next." "What happens next is I take you home," Luca said. "I make sure you're safe, and then—" Gunfire shattered the quiet. The sound came from the ballroom, sharp, percussive, unmistakable. Screams followed. Luca moved with terrifying speed, pulling Elena behind him, positioning his body between her and the door. His hand disappeared into his jacket, the one he must have retrieved, and came out holding a gun. Elena's mind went blank with shock. "Stay behind me," Luca commanded, his voice deadly calm. "Do exactly what I say. Understand?" She couldn't speak, could only nod. More gunfire. Closer now, footsteps running. The door to the library rattled. Luca raised his weapon, steady and professional. The door burst open and Marco stumbled in, blood spreading across his shoulder. They breached, lobbies compromised, Constantine's men. Another shot, and the window behind them exploded in a shower of glass. Luca grabbed Elena, dragging her down behind a heavy desk as bullets tore through the room. Books exploded off shelves, wood splintered, the chandelier crashed to the floor. Elena couldn't breathe, couldn't think. This wasn't real. This couldn't be real. Luca returned fire, 3 precise shots that bought them seconds. Then he was pulling her toward a different door, servant's entrance, maybe. His body shielding hers completely. "Move!" he shouted. They ran. Down dark corridors, past screaming staff, through kitchens where chefs cowered. Luca knew every turn, every exit. His hand gripped hers so tightly it hurt, but Elena didn't care. She just ran, terror giving her speed she didn't know she possessed. They burst into a parking garage. A black SUV screeched to a halt beside them, and Luca threw open the door, practically lifting Elena inside before diving in after her. "Drive!" he barked. The vehicle accelerated, tires shrieking. Elena twisted around to look back and saw figures emerging from the hotel, weapons raised. Luca pulled her down, covering her body with his own as the rear window shattered. Then they were on the street, speeding through Boston traffic, sirens wailing in the distance. And Elena couldn't stop shaking. Luca held her against his chest, his heart pounding as hard as hers. "You're safe," he murmured into her hair. "You're safe. I've got you. You're safe." But Elena knew, with absolute certainty, that nothing would ever be safe again. The SUV didn't slow until they'd crossed the Charles River into Cambridge, then continued north through neighborhoods Elena barely recognized. She stayed pressed against Luca's chest, His arms locked around her, both of them breathing too fast. The adrenaline made her hands shake uncontrollably. Marco. Luca's voice was sharp. Status. The driver, not Marco, Elena realized, someone else, spoke without turning around. 3 casualties confirmed at the hotel. All Constantine's men. Marco's at the safe house getting patched up. He'll live. Police? Responding now. Our people are already feeding them the story. Russian mob dispute. Nothing to do with the charity event. The venue's security footage is being handled. Luca's jaw tightened. And Constantine? Gone. Disappeared before SWPD arrived. A string of Italian curses hissed through Luca's teeth. His arms tightened around Elena, and she felt the barely controlled rage vibrating through his body. She should say something, ask questions, demand answers. But her mind couldn't process what had just happened. 20 minutes ago, she'd been cleaning blood from his knuckles. Now people were dead, and she was fleeing through the night with a man who carried a gun like it was a natural extension of his arm. The SUV turned into an underground parking garage beneath a sleek high-rise. Concrete pillars flashed past. They spiraled down 2 levels before stopping in a private bay. Clear? Luca asked. Clear. Perimeters secure. Only then did Luca release Elena. He pulled back to look at her, his hands framing her face, eyes scanning for injuries. Are you hurt? Did any glass cut you? Elena shook her head mutely. Talk to me, Elena. I need to hear your voice. Her voice cracked. I'm not hurt. Relief flooded his features, but it was quickly replaced by something darker. Guilt. This is my fault. I should never have brought you to that room. Should have taken you home the moment Marco interrupted. What just happened? Elena's voice was barely a whisper. Who were those people? Why were they shooting? Luca's expression shuddered. Come inside. I'll explain everything. But first I need to know you're truly okay. The driver opened Elena's door. She climbed out on shaking legs, Luca's hand immediately at her elbow, steadying her. They moved to a private elevator that required a key card. The doors slid shut, sealing them in silence as they rose. Elena caught her reflection in the polished steel doors. Her hair was disheveled, her makeup smudged. There was a small tear in her dress that she didn't remember happening. She looked like someone who'd survived a disaster. She looked like someone whose life had just been torn apart. The elevator opened directly into a penthouse. Floor-to-ceiling windows revealed Boston's skyline glittering in the distance. The space was masculine and minimalist, dark leather, clean lines, expensive art on white walls. Everything was precise, controlled, revealing nothing about the man who lived here. Sit, Luca said gently, guiding her to a leather sofa. I'll get you water. He disappeared into what Elena assumed was the kitchen. She sat, numb, staring at her hands. They were still shaking. When Luca returned, he brought water and a heavy blanket, which he draped around her shoulders. The gesture was so unexpectedly tender that Elena felt tears prick her eyes. Drink, he said, pressing the glass into her hands. She obeyed automatically, the cold water grounding her slightly. Luca sat beside her, not touching, giving her space, and watched her with an intensity that made her hyper-aware of his presence. I need to tell you some things, he said quietly, and I need you to listen without interrupting, because if I stop, I might not find the courage to continue. Elena nodded. Luca leaned forward, elbows on his knees, hands clasped. For a long moment he was silent, organizing his thoughts. When he finally spoke, his voice was carefully controlled. My family has been in Boston for 3 generations. My grandfather came from Sicily in the 50s with nothing, built a construction company from the ground up, did well for himself. When my father inherited the business, he expanded it. Real estate development, property management, legitimate enterprises, he paused, and some that weren't so legitimate. Elena's stomach tightened, but she stayed quiet. I grew up knowing what my father was, what our family did. The protection money, the intimidation, the way certain contracts always went our way because people were afraid to bid against us. I told myself I'd be different, went to MIT, studied architecture, planned to build things the right way. His laugh was bitter. Then my father had a heart attack when I was 26, died in his office, paperwork scattered on his desk, and suddenly I was responsible for everything, the legitimate businesses and the other kind. You didn't have to take over, Elena said softly. Didn't I? Luca looked at her. Walk away and let everything collapse? Let the families who depended on us lose their livelihoods? Let our enemies move in and take what 3 generations built? He shook his head. So I made choices. Kept the construction company, the real estate holdings. But I also kept the other operations running, at least for a while. Made deals I'm not proud of. Hurt people who threatened what was mine. And now? Elena's voice was barely audible. Now I'm trying to change things. Transition everything to legitimate business. Fund community programs. Build affordable housing. Be the man I should have been from the start. His hands tightened. But the past doesn't let go easily. Men like Constantine, they see me going legitimate as weakness, as opportunity. Who is Constantine? Russian. Runs trafficking operations through the port, drugs, weapons, people. We used to have an arrangement, kept out of each other's territories. But he wants to expand, and I won't allow it. Luca's voice hardened. I won't profit from human suffering, not anymore. So I told him no, and apparently he decided to send a message tonight. Elena processed this, trying to reconcile the man who danced with her, who'd spoken poetry and architecture with the reality he was describing. You killed people tonight. My men killed 3 of his. I would have killed more if necessary. No apology, no justification, just fact. And you carry a gun. Always. Why did you approach me? The question burst out of her. At the gala. If your life is this dangerous, why drag me into it? Luca turned to face her fully, and the raw honesty in his expression stole her breath. Because the moment I saw you, I forgot to be careful. You stood there looking lost and beautiful and real, and I wanted... He stopped, jaw working. I wanted something good for once, something untouched by all the ugliness in my life. I convinced myself I could have one dance, one conversation, then let you go. But I was selfish and stupid, and now you're here and you almost died because I couldn't walk away. Tears spilled down Elena's cheeks. I should be terrified of you. Yes. I should leave right now and never look back. Yes, Luca said again, his voice rough. But I keep thinking about how you protected me, how you put your body between me and the bullets without hesitation, how you're sitting here telling me the truth even though it would be easier to lie. Elena wiped at her tears. Who does that? Someone who doesn't deserve you. Stop telling me what I deserve. She set down the water glass with more force than necessary. I'm 28 years old. I've made my own choices, my own mistakes. I chose to dance with you. I chose to go to that library. I chose to stay when you asked me to wait. Don't take that agency away from me now. Something shifted in Luca's expression. Respect, maybe. You're right. I apologize. What happens now? Elena asked. Am I in danger? Will Constantine come after me? Luca's face went hard. Not if I can prevent it. Tonight was chaos. I don't think he knows who you are yet, but I need to keep you safe until I'm certain. Keep me safe how? You can stay here. I have security, cameras, a team that will make sure no one gets near you. Or I can arrange somewhere else if you'd prefer. A hotel, private security, whatever makes you comfortable. Elena looked around the penthouse. This cage of glass and steel and expensive emptiness. For how long? Until I resolve this. A few days, maybe a week. I have a life, Luca. A job search, bills to pay, an apartment. I'll handle it. Your rent, your bills, whatever you need. Pride flared hot in her chest. I'm not a charity case. That's not what I meant. I don't need you to save me or solve my problems. I need... Elena stopped, frustrated. What did she need? To go home and pretend tonight never happened? To walk away from this dangerous, complicated man who made her feel things she'd never felt before? Luca waited, giving her space to work through it. I need time, Elena finally said. To think, to process. This is all. It's too much. Of course. Luca stood, putting physical distance between them. The guest room is down the hall, second door. Everything you need is there. You're free to go whenever you want, but please... His voice roughened. Please wait until morning. Let me make sure it's safe first. Elena nodded, exhaustion suddenly crashing over her. The adrenaline was wearing off, leaving her drained and hollow. She stood, the blanket falling from her shoulders, and Luca was there immediately, catching it, his hands careful not to touch her. The restraint in that simple gesture undid something in Elena's chest. "Thank you," she whispered, "for being honest, for protecting me, for—" She couldn't finish. Luca's eyes held a world of things unsaid. "Sleep, Elena. Everything will look clear in the morning." The guest room was tastefully decorated in shades of cream and gray. Elena found pajamas in the dresser, expensive silk that had clearly never been worn, and toiletries in the bathroom still in their packaging. She showered, washing away the smell of smoke and fear, then crawled into bed. She didn't expect to sleep, but sometime in the dark hours before dawn, exhaustion claimed her. Elena woke to sunlight streaming through unfamiliar windows and a moment of complete disorientation. Then memory flooded back and she sat up, heart pounding. A clock on the nightstand read 9:30. She'd slept for hours. After dressing in her wrinkled gala dress, the only clothes she had, Elena ventured into the hallway. Voices drifted from somewhere deeper in the penthouse. She followed the sound to a spacious kitchen where Luca stood with two men, all of them studying a tablet. Luca looked up the moment she appeared, as if he'd sensed her presence. He wore dark jeans and a gray sweater, casual clothes that made him look younger, almost approachable. The severe businessman from last night was gone. "Elena, good morning." He crossed to her immediately. "How did you sleep?" "Better than expected." She glanced at the other men, who were watching her with undisguised curiosity. "This is Antonio and Michael. They handle security." Luca's voice carried a warning the other men clearly understood. They nodded politely and excused themselves, leaving her alone with Luca. "Coffee," he offered. "Please." He poured her a cup from an expensive-looking machine, added cream without asking how she took it, he'd noticed last night, and handed it to her. The domesticity of the gesture felt surreal. Elena sipped the coffee, gathering courage. "I need to go home." Luca's expression tightened, but he nodded. "I understand. Let me arrange." "I'm not finished." She set down the cup. "I need to go home, get my things, figure out what I'm doing with my life, but I also—" She took a breath. "I want to see you again." Hope flickered across his face. "Elena, I know it's crazy. I know you're dangerous and complicated and probably the worst possible choice I could make. But last night, before everything went wrong, I felt more alive than I have in years. And I need to know if that was just adrenaline or something real." Luca moved closer, his eyes searching hers. "It was real, at least for me." "Then give me time to process this, to go home and think clearly without all this—" She gestured at the luxury surrounding them. "Without this. And then if I decide I want to see where this goes, will you be honest with me? No more secrets? No protecting me from the truth?" "Yes." The word was immediate, unequivocal. "Even if the truth is ugly?" "Especially then." Luca reached for her hand, and this time Elena let him take it. "I won't lie to you, Elena. Not about who I am or what my life entails. That's a promise." Elena believed him. Against all logic, she believed every word. "Okay," she said. "Take me home." The drive back to Alston felt like traveling between worlds. They took a different car, a sleek sedan with tinted windows, and Luca drove himself, which seemed to surprise the security team. Elena watched Boston pass by the windows, ordinary people living ordinary lives, unaware that just hours ago, violence had shattered a charity gala. "Will there be news coverage?" she asked. "Some, but it'll be contained. Officially, it was a targeted attack between rival organizations. The charity wasn't the intended target. Most attendees won't even know shots were fired. They were evacuated through different exits. That's terrifying, that you can just control the narrative like that." "Welcome to my world." Luca's voice was dry. Money and connections buy a lot of silence. They pulled up outside Elena's building, a modest triple-decker with peeling paint. She saw Luca take in the neighborhood, not dangerous, but not safe either. Working-class families, students, immigrants trying to build better lives. "I'll walk you up," he said. "You don't have to—" "Elena." He looked at her. "I'll walk you up." Her apartment was on the 3rd floor, up narrow stairs that creaked. Elena was suddenly painfully aware of how small her world must seem to him. The studio was barely 400 square feet, bed in one corner, tiny kitchen along one wall, a desk piled with notebooks and rejection letters. Everything she owned fit in this single room. But Luca didn't judge. He stood in the doorway, taking it in, and his expression was thoughtful rather than dismissive. "It's not much," Elena said defensively. "It's honest." He moved to her desk, picked up one of her notebooks. "May I?" She nodded, watching as he flipped through pages of her handwriting, story fragments, character sketches, dialogue she'd captured at coffee shops. "You're talented," Luca said quietly. "These are good, Elena. Really good." Unexpected tears pricked her eyes. "Then why can't I finish anything? Why do I start 10 stories and abandon them all?" "Because you're afraid." He set down the notebook and looked at her. Not of failure, of success, of what it would mean to actually complete something and put it out into the world and let people judge it. The observation cut too close to truth. Elena turned away, busying herself with straightening already straight papers. "You don't know me well enough to make that assessment." "Maybe not, but I recognize fear. I've lived with it my whole life." Luca's voice was gentle. "The difference is I was taught to hide it behind power and violence. You hide it behind self-doubt and unfinished projects. But it's the same thing. Protection against being hurt." Elena's throat tightened. "This is too much honesty for 10 in the morning. You asked for honesty." "I did. I just—" She sat on the edge of her bed, suddenly exhausted again. "I don't know how to do this, Luca. How to want something that scares me this much." He crossed the small space and knelt in front of her, bringing them eye to eye. "Then we take it slowly. No pressure, no expectations. I give you my number. You take time to think. If you want to see me again, you call. If you don't, I respect that choice and disappear from your life." "Just like that?" "Just like that." But his eyes told a different story, that walking away from her would cost him dearly. Elena reached out, let her fingers trace the scar through his eyebrow. "How did you get this?" "Knife fight when I was 19. I was cocky, thought I was invincible. Someone taught me otherwise." "Does it hurt?" "Not anymore. Just a reminder to be more careful." His hand came up to cover hers against his face. "I'm trying to be careful with you, Elena. Trying to give you space to choose. But the truth is, I want you. Want to know everything about you. Want to help you finish those stories and see them published. Want to wake up and find you in my kitchen drinking coffee. Want—" He stopped himself, jaw tightening. "Want what?" Elena whispered. "Too much. Too soon." Luca stood, putting distance between them again. "I should go, let you process." He pulled a card from his wallet, heavy stock, embossed with just a name and phone number. No company, no title. He set it on her desk. "Call me when you're ready. Or don't. But know that either way, I'll make sure you're safe. Constantine won't touch you." "How can you promise that?" Something dark and dangerous crossed his face. "Because I'll make it very clear what happens to anyone who threatens what's mine." "I'm not yours," Elena said, but without heat. "Not yet." Luca moved to the door, then paused. "Thank you, Elena, for last night, for this morning, for seeing me as something more than the violence in my life. That's a gift I don't deserve, but will treasure." Then he was gone, his footsteps receding down the stairs. Elena sat in the silence of her apartment, staring at the business card on her desk. Her phone buzzed. Jessica, finally checking in. "Oh my God, are you okay? I heard there was some kind of incident at the gala. The event company is going crazy. Nobody knows what happened, but there were police and—" "I'm fine," Elena interrupted. "I left early." "You missed all the drama then? Apparently some Russian gang thing? I don't know, the details are all confused, but I'm so glad you got out before—" "Wait, did you meet anyone interesting at least?" Elena looked at the card. "Luca Moretti." "Maybe. I don't know yet." "Ooh, mysterious. Tell me everything." "Later. I need to shower and think." After extracting a promise to meet for coffee soon, Elena hung up. She showered again, washing away the last physical traces of the previous night. Then she sat at her desk and opened a fresh notebook. For the first time in months, words flowed without forcing them. She wrote about a woman who attended a party where she didn't belong, who danced with danger and survived, who stood at a crossroads between safety and something terrifyingly real. Elena wrote for hours, barely aware of time passing. When she finally stopped, her hand cramping, she had 15 pages, more than she'd written in the past 6 months combined. She looked at Luca's card again. 3 days, she decided. She'd give herself 3 days to think clearly, away from his intensity and the pull she felt toward him. 3 days to be practical, to research who Luca Moretti really was, to consider the insanity of pursuing anything with a man who lived with violence as casually as other people lived with commuter traffic. But even as she made that rational decision, Elena knew with bone-deep certainty that she would call him. Because despite everything, the danger, the complications, the absolute madness of it all, she wanted to know what happened next. The next morning, Elena woke to find an envelope slipped under her door. Inside was a check for $5,000 and a note in elegant handwriting. Not charity, payment for emotional distress caused by my carelessness. If you won't accept it for yourself, use it for something you believe in. L. Elena stared at the check, a war raging inside her. Pride said to tear it up. Practicality said her rent was 3 weeks overdue. She compromised. She deposited the check and immediately donated half to a literacy program she'd volunteered with in college. The other half went to rent and the credit card company. It wasn't accepting charity if she was sharing it, she told herself. That afternoon, she went to the library and researched Luca Moretti. The public record was surprisingly sparse. His real estate company existed, Moretti Development, with projects throughout New England. There were photos from charity events, always in the background, rarely smiling. Business articles mentioned him in passing as a developer who prioritized affordable housing and community spaces, unusual in an industry driven by profit margins. But there were gaps, conspicuous absences, no social media presence, no interviews, no personal details beyond the bare facts of his education and business holdings. Elena dug deeper, searching old newspaper archives. She found his father's obituary from 7 years ago. A brief mention of Luca in an article about construction bid rigging allegations that went nowhere. A photograph from a groundbreaking ceremony where he stood with city officials and community leaders. Nothing that screamed organized crime, but nothing that disproved it either. Elena thought about the gun he'd carried so naturally, the way his men obeyed without question, the controlled violence in his expression when Marco had burst into that library. She should run. Every self-preservation instinct screamed at her to run. Instead, on the evening of the third day, Elena picked up her phone and dialed the number on his card. He answered on the first ring. Elena. Just her name, but the relief and hunger in his voice made her breath catch. Hi, she said softly. Hi. A pause. How are you? Confused, scared, unable to stop thinking about you. Honesty felt easier over the phone. I researched you. And I couldn't find much, which I think tells me more than finding a lot would have. Luca was quiet for a moment. What do you want to know? Everything, but not over the phone. Elena took a breath. Have dinner with me. Somewhere public, somewhere normal. Let me see who you are when you're not protecting me or confessing your sins. When? Tomorrow night, 7 o'clock. There's a small Italian place in the North End, Trattoria Il Panino. Do you know it? I know it. His voice warmed. It's perfect. Luca? Yes? If we do this, if we try whatever this is, I need you to understand something. I won't be hidden. I won't be a secret or a weakness you need to protect. I'll stand beside you, or I won't stand there at all. The silence stretched so long, Elena thought he might have hung up. Then, that's exactly what I'm afraid of. That you'll stand beside me and be hurt because of it. That's my risk to take. Elena, 7 o'clock tomorrow. We'll talk then. She hung up before he could argue, before she could lose her nerve, before the reality of what she was choosing could overwhelm her. Then Elena opened her laptop and started writing. Not about fictional characters this time. About herself. About a woman stepping into the unknown and choosing courage over safety. The words poured out like a dam breaking. And for the first time in years, Elena felt like she might actually finish something. Elena arrived at Trattoria Il Panino 15 minutes early, her nerves making punctuality impossible. The restaurant was tucked on a narrow street in the North End, the kind of place tourists walked past without noticing. Red check tablecloths, wine bottles lining the walls, the smell of garlic and basil heavy in the air. She'd chosen it deliberately, small, intimate, but public enough to feel safe. She wore a simple blue dress she'd owned for years, nothing special, but it made her feel like herself. Not the woman in the borrowed gown fleeing bullets, but Elena Carter, aspiring writer, making a choice about her own life. The hostess seated her at a corner table. Elena ordered water and tried not to watch the door. She failed spectacularly. At precisely 7 o'clock, Luca walked in, and Elena's breath caught despite her determination to stay calm. He wore dark slacks and a black sweater, no tie, no armor of expensive suits. His eyes found her immediately, and the expression on his face, relief mixed with something tender and uncertain, made her heart squeeze. He crossed to her table, and for a moment they just looked at each other. "Hi," Luca said softly. "Hi." Elena gestured to the chair across from her. "You're exactly on time. I've been parked outside for 20 minutes. A ghost of a smile touched his lips. Didn't want to seem too eager. "How's that working out?" "Terribly." He sat, and Elena noticed his hands weren't quite steady. Luca Moretti, who'd faced armed men without flinching, was nervous about dinner with her. The realization was oddly reassuring. The waiter appeared, and they ordered pasta for her, risotto for him, a bottle of Chianti to share. When they were alone again, silence stretched between them, heavy with everything unsaid. "I don't know how to do this," Elena admitted. "Normal date conversation feels absurd after everything that's happened." "Then let's not do normal." Luca leaned forward. "Ask me anything. The questions you've been thinking about for 3 days, I'll answer honestly." Elena took a breath. "Have you killed anyone?" She expected hesitation, deflection. Instead, Luca held her gaze and said, "Yes." The word hung between them. Elena's hands tightened around her water glass. "How many?" "Does the number matter?" "I don't know. Maybe." She studied his face, looking for remorse, for satisfaction, for anything that would help her understand. "Do you regret it?" "Some of them." Luca's voice was steady, controlled. "There was a man who tried to bomb one of my construction sites. Workers inside, families depending on those jobs. I found him before the police did. I didn't call them." He paused. "I don't regret that one. There were others, early on, when I was young and angry and proving myself, those I regret. Not because they didn't deserve what happened, but because of what it cost me, what it made me." "And you expect me to be okay with this?" Elena's voice shook slightly. "To sit here and hear you confess to murder and just—" "No." Luca cut her off. "I don't expect you to be okay with it. I expect you to hear the truth and make your own choice. That's why we're here, in public, where you can walk away anytime you want. I'm not trying to justify what I've done. I'm showing you who I am." The waiter returned with their wine. Luca poured for both of them, his movements precise and careful. Elena took a long sip, letting the wine warm her. "Tell me about your family, not the business, your actual family." Something in Luca's expression softened. "My mother died when I was 12. Cancer. My father raised me alone, and he loved me the only way he knew how, by making me strong, teaching me to survive in a world that would try to break me." He swirled wine in his glass. "I have a younger sister, Sophia. She lives in California, as far from this life as possible. Art teacher, married to a pediatrician, 2 kids I see maybe twice a year. I made sure she could escape. That was my gift to her." "Does she know what you do?" "She knows enough. We don't talk about it." Pain flickered across his face. "She thinks I'm a monster. Maybe she's right. If you were a monster, you wouldn't care what she thinks. Or I'm just sentimental about the few people I haven't destroyed yet." Luca's voice was bitter. Their food arrived, and they ate in silence for a few minutes. The pasta was perfect, but Elena barely tasted it. She was too aware of Luca across from her, of the weight of honesty between them. "My turn," Luca said quietly. "Why did you call me? After 3 days of thinking, researching, probably finding enough to scare any rational person away, why did you still call?" Elena set down her fork. "Because I'm tired of being afraid. I've spent my whole life playing it safe, choosing the practical option, the sensible path. And where has it gotten me? Alone in a studio apartment, drowning in debt, too scared to finish anything I start. She met his eyes. You terrify me, Luca. Not because of what you've done, but because of how you make me feel. Like I could be someone different, someone braver. You're already brave. No, I'm reckless. There's a difference. Elena took another sip of wine. Brave would be finishing my novel and submitting it to agents. Reckless is sitting here with you, knowing what you are, and wanting to stay anyway. Luca reached across the table, his hand stopping just short of touching hers. I won't hurt you, Elena. Whatever else happens, I promise you that. You can't promise that. She looked at his hand so close to hers. People in your world get hurt. You said so yourself. Then I'll make sure you're protected, whatever it costs. That's not what I want. Elena's frustration bubbled over. I don't want to be locked in a penthouse under guard. I don't want to be something you protect and hide away. If we do this, whatever this is, I need to be part of your actual life, not a secret. Luca's jaw tightened. You don't understand what you're asking. Then explain it to me. He was quiet for a long moment, his dark eyes searching hers. Finally, he said, My world has rules. The women in it, wives, girlfriends, daughters, they're considered untouchable, sacred, but only if the man they belong to is strong enough to enforce that protection. Show any weakness, any vulnerability, and suddenly those same women become targets. Leverage. His hand finally closed around hers, gripped tight. If my enemies know you matter to me, they'll come for you. Not to hurt me financially or destroy my reputation, but to break me completely. That's what Constantine would do. That's what any of them would do. So your solution is to hide me forever? My solution is to eliminate the threats first. Then you can stand beside me safely. Elena pulled her hand away. How long will that take? Months? Years? And what happens if new threats emerge? Will you just keep me locked away indefinitely? I don't know. The admission seemed to cost him. I haven't figured it out yet. All I know is that the thought of you being hurt because of me, his voice roughened. I can't accept that risk. It's not your risk to accept or refuse. It's mine. They stared at each other, the impasse clear. Around them, other diners laughed and talked, living normal lives with normal problems. Elena envied them fiercely. Tell me something good, she said finally. Something that doesn't involve violence or protection or danger. Tell me who you are when none of that matters. Luca leaned back, considering. I draw. Architecture, mostly, but sometimes just things I see. Light falling through windows, the curve of a bridge, the skyline at dawn. A hint of self-consciousness crept into his voice. It's how I think, I guess. Putting things on paper, making sense of structure and space. Do you still design buildings? Sometimes. I have an architect on staff who does most of the technical work, but I sketch the initial concepts. There's a community center we're building in Dorchester. I spent 6 months on those drawings, making sure every detail was right, that it would feel welcoming, safe, a place where kids could go after school and actually want to be there. Elena heard the passion in his voice, saw the animation in his face. This was the man beneath the violence, the one who'd studied architecture at M1T, who saw beauty in structure and form. I'd like to see your drawings sometime, she said. I'd like to show you. Luca's expression softened. What about you? What does Elena Carter love when she's not worrying about bills and rejection letters? Books, obviously. Getting lost in other people's stories. Elena relaxed slightly, grateful for the shift in conversation. I love thunderstorms, the way the air smells right before rain, farmers' markets, wandering through stalls of fresh produce even though I can barely afford anything, museums on weekday afternoons when they're almost empty and you can sit in front of a painting for an hour without anyone bothering you. Which museums? The MFA, mostly. There's a Sargent painting, Daughters of Edward Darley Boyd, I could stare at for hours. The way he captures the children in that huge room, the space between them, the isolation even though they're together. She smiled self-consciously. I'm rambling. No, keep going. I want to hear all of it. So Elena talked, and Luca listened with complete attention. She told him about the coffee shop where she used to write before they raised their prices beyond her budget. The walking path along the Charles River where she went to think. The used bookstore in Cambridge that let her trade paperbacks and always had the kind of worn-in novels she loved. In return, Luca told her about the rare book collection he'd inherited from his mother, the architecture tours he took in foreign cities when business took him abroad, his habit of walking through construction sites at dawn before workers arrived, checking progress in the quiet morning light. They talked through dinner and dessert, through 2 cups of coffee each. The restaurant began to empty around them, but neither seemed to notice. "I have something to show you," Luca said finally, "if you're willing to extend this evening a bit longer." Elena should have been cautious, should have insisted on ending the night here, maintaining boundaries. Instead, she found herself nodding. Luca paid the check despite her protests, and they walked out into the cool October night. His car was parked 2 blocks away, not the SUV from before, but a sleek, dark sedan that looked expensive but understated. "Where are we going?" Elena asked as he opened her door. "You'll see. It's not far." They drove through the north end, past the waterfront, into a neighborhood Elena recognized as the seaport. New construction rose on all sides, glass and steel towers transforming what had once been industrial wasteland. Luca pulled into an underground garage beneath a building that was clearly still under construction. "This is yours?" Elena asked. "One of mine." He parked and came around to open her door. "Come on." They took a construction elevator to the top floor, passing through spaces that were raw and unfinished. Luca produced keys and opened a heavy door, then gestured for Elena to precede him. She stepped into an enormous loft space with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Boston Harbor. The city lights glittered across the water. Moonlight painted everything silver and shadow. The space itself was empty except for a drafting table near the windows, covered in papers and pencils. "This will be my office when the building's finished," Luca explained. "But for now, it's just mine. Private. No one else comes here." Elena moved to the windows, drawn by the view. "It's beautiful. I come here when I need to think, to draw, to remember why I'm trying to build something instead of just managing what my father left me." Luca joined her at the window, standing close but not touching. "I wanted you to see it, to know that this part of me exists too." Elena turned to look at him, and in the dim light filtering through the windows, his face was softer than she'd ever seen it. Vulnerable. Young. "Thank you for sharing this with me," she said quietly. "Elena." Her name was almost a sigh. "I need to tell you something." "Okay." Luca turns to face her fully. "The situation with Constantine. It's escalating. He's made it clear he won't back down, which means I can't either. There will be violence soon, and I can't guarantee I'll be able to keep you completely separate from it." Elena's stomach tightened. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying that if you choose to be with me, you need to understand what that means. Not in theory, but in practice. You'll have security following you. Your movements will be monitored for your own safety. People will watch you, judge you, assume things about who you are and how you got there. And someday, maybe not soon, but someday, you might see me do something that will make you question everything you think you know about me." "Trying to scare me away again?" "Yes." His honesty was brutal. "Because once you're truly in my life, getting you out safely becomes almost impossible. The people I'm connected to, the world I operate in, they don't forget. Once you're mine, you're always mine in their eyes." "I don't belong to anyone," Elena said firmly. "I know. I'm explaining how they'll see it." Luca's hands clenched at his sides, like he was physically restraining himself from reaching for her. "I'm trying to give you every reason to run while you still can. Because I'm selfish enough that if you stay, I won't let you go easily." Elena processed this, her heart hammering. This was the moment. The real choice. Not the impulsive decision to call him or meet for dinner, but the conscious selection of a path that would fundamentally alter her life. She thought about her studio apartment, her unfinished stories, her small, safe existence. She thought about the fear that had governed her choices for years, the way she'd always chosen security over possibility. Then she thought about dancing with Luca under crystal chandeliers, the way he'd covered her body with his own when bullets flew. The passion in his voice when he talked about architecture and community centers. The drawings on his drafting table, evidence of beauty created by hands that had also dealt in violence. "I'm terrified," she said finally. Of you, of this, of what choosing you might cost me. But I'm more terrified of walking away and spending the rest of my life wondering what might have been. Luca closed his eyes briefly, and when he opened them, the emotion there stole her breath. You're sure? No, but I'm choosing you anyway. He moved then, closing the distance between them in 2 strides. His hands came up to frame her face, gentle despite the intensity in his touch. Elena, I don't deserve this. I don't deserve you. Probably not, she agreed and was rewarded with a surprised huff of laughter. But you're what I want. Just promise me something. Anything. Promise you'll be honest with me, even when it's hard, even when you think you're protecting me by hiding things. I need to know what I'm dealing with. I promise. Luca's thumb traced her cheekbone. No more secrets between us. Then he kissed her, and Elena's world tilted. His mouth was gentle at first, questioning, giving her space to pull away. But when she leaned into him instead, her hands fisting in his sweater, the kiss deepened into something that felt like desperation and relief and promise, all tangled together. They broke apart, breathing hard, foreheads pressed together. I've wanted to do that since the moment I saw you, Luca murmured against her lips. Took you long enough. He laughed, a real laugh that transformed his face into something approaching joy. Then he kissed her again and again, and Elena lost track of time, lost track of everything except the feel of his hands in her hair, his mouth on hers, the solid reality of his body against hers. When they finally separated, Elena was dizzy with want and emotion. Luca looked similarly affected, his usual control fractured into something raw and honest. I should take you home, he said, though he made no move to release her. You should, Elena agreed, not moving either. If we stay here much longer, I won't be able to. Elena understood what he meant. The empty loft, the privacy, the tension stretched taut between them. It would be so easy to let this spiral into something more. But despite her choice, despite kissing him, she wasn't ready for that. Not yet. Take me home, she said softly. Luca nodded, stepping back with visible effort. Come on. The drive back to Alston felt both too long and too short. Luca kept one hand on the steering wheel, the other tangled with Elena's fingers. They didn't talk much, but the silence felt comfortable now, charged with possibility rather than tension. When they pulled up outside her building, Luca parked and turned to her. Can I see you tomorrow? I'd like that. Dinner again? Or there's an art opening at a gallery in the South End, contemporary photography. I thought you might enjoy it. Elena smiled. You're not going to lock me in your penthouse immediately? I told you, I want you in my actual life. That means galleries and dinners and normal things. At least, he hesitated. At least as normal as my life allows. The gallery sounds perfect. Luca raised her hand to his lips, kissing her knuckles in that gesture that was becoming familiar. I'll pick you up at 7. Elena nodded and climbed out of the car. She made it halfway to her building before Luca's voice stopped her. Elena. She turned. He was standing beside the car, backlit by streetlights, looking at her with an expression that made her chest ache. Thank you for choosing this. For choosing me. Elena didn't trust herself to speak. She just smiled and went inside, feeling his eyes on her until she disappeared from view. In her apartment, she leaned against the closed door and tried to process what had just happened. She'd committed herself to a dangerous man with a violent past and an uncertain future. She'd kissed him like she was drowning, and he was air. She'd chosen complexity over safety, possibility over security. She should be terrified, and she was. But underneath the fear was something else. Excitement, anticipation, the feeling of being fully, completely alive. Elena moved to her desk and opened her laptop. The story she'd been working on stared back at her, waiting. She read what she'd written, then began typing, the words flowing faster than she could think them. She wrote until 3 a.m, until her eyes burned and her fingers cramped. And when she finally crawled into bed, she dreamed of empty lofts and city lights and a man with scarred knuckles who drew beautiful things. The next morning, Elena woke to her phone ringing. Unknown number. Hello? Ms. Carter? A woman's voice, professional and cool. This is Sarah Chen with the literary agency Hartwell and Associates. I hope I'm not calling too early. Elena sat up, suddenly wide awake. No, not at all. How can I help you? We received your sample chapters for the stories we tell ourselves. I have to say, I was quite impressed. The voice is distinctive, the prose is strong. I'd very much like to see the complete manuscript. Elena's heart stopped. I'm sorry, what? I didn't submit anything to your agency. A pause. According to our records, we received your first 3 chapters via email last week, along with a compelling query letter. You didn't send this? No, I haven't submitted anything to anyone in over a year. Elena's mind raced. Can you tell me what email address it came from? Certainly, one moment. The sound of typing. It came from your email, ecarter.writes@gmail.com. That was her email. But Elena definitely hadn't sent anything. Ms. Carter, are you still there? Yes, I'm here. I'm a bit confused. Elena tried to think. Can you tell me more about the sample chapters? What was the story about? A woman attending a charity gala where she doesn't belong, who meets a dangerous man and must decide whether to step into his world. The writing had real emotional depth, and the character development was excellent. Honestly, it's exactly the kind of contemporary romance with edge that we're looking for. Elena's blood ran cold. She'd written those chapters. In the past 3 days, pouring out everything she'd been feeling, everything that had happened, but she'd saved them on her laptop. She hadn't sent them anywhere. Ms. Chen, I appreciate the call, but I need to look into this. Can I get back to you? Of course, take my direct number. She rattled off digits that Elena scribbled on a notepad. I'm serious about wanting to see the full manuscript, Ms. Carter. Whether you submitted intentionally or accidentally, the work is strong. Don't let this opportunity pass. Elena thanked her and hung up, then immediately opened her laptop. Her email showed a sent message from 5 days ago, before she'd even started writing the current story. The subject line read, Query, Contemporary Romance, The Stories We Tell Ourselves. She opened the sent message. It contained a professional query letter and 3 attached chapters. Not the chapters she'd written this week, but older ones. A story she'd abandoned months ago about a woman caught between safety and desire. Elena had not sent this, she was certain, which meant someone else had. Her phone buzzed with a text from Luca. Good morning? Still on for tonight? Elena stared at the message, suspicion creeping through her. He'd seen her notebooks, her unfinished stories. He'd talked about helping her get published. And he had resources, connections, the kind of power that could make things happen. She called him instead of texting back. Elena. His voice was warm. I was just thinking about you. Did you submit my work to a literary agent? Silence. Then, can we talk about this in person? So you did. Elena's voice was tight. You went through my personal writing and sent it out without my permission? I can explain. No. She cut him off. You promised me honesty. You promised no secrets. And the first thing you do is go behind my back and I did it before last night. Luca's voice was tense. Before you agreed to give this a chance, I saw your work, saw how talented you are, and I wanted to help. I have a contact at that agency, and I asked them to look at your submission. That's all. That's all? Elena's anger flared. You don't get to make decisions about my career, my life, without asking me. This is exactly what I told you I didn't want. You protecting me, managing me, controlling things because you think you know better. You're right. The admission was immediate. You're absolutely right, and I'm sorry. It was inappropriate and presumptuous, and I should have asked first. His quick agreement deflated some of Elena's anger, but her frustration remained. Why would you do this? Because I believed in you when you didn't believe in yourself. Because I saw something beautiful and wanted the world to see it too. Luca's voice roughened. Because I'm not used to asking permission before fixing things, and I forgot that you're not something broken that needs fixing. You were right last night. I don't know how to do this, how to be with someone as an equal instead of someone to protect. Elena sank onto her bed, emotions warring inside her. The agent wants to see the full manuscript. That's good, isn't it? It would be if I had a full manuscript. I have 3 chapters and a lot of fragments. She rubbed her eyes. And now I don't know if she liked it because it's actually good or because you pulled strings. I didn't pull strings. I asked my contact to give it a fair read, that's all. Whatever she said to you was based solely on the quality of your writing. A pause. But I understand if you don't believe that right now. Elena wanted to stay angry. It would be easier to stay angry, to use this as an excuse to back out before things got more complicated. But beneath her anger was something else. The knowledge that Luca had read her work and thought it was good enough to share. That he'd believed in her talent even when she didn't. "I'm still mad at you," she said finally. "I know. But I'm also, I don't know, conflicted." Elena took a breath. "I need you to understand something. If we're going to do this, you can't make decisions for me. You can't manage my life or my career because you think you're helping. I need to succeed or fail on my own merits." "I understand, and I promise no more interference without your explicit permission." "Okay." Elena wasn't entirely convinced, but she heard the sincerity in his voice. "Tonight, can we just have a normal evening? No complications, no drama, no revelations about your past or mine? I would love nothing more." They hung up, and Elena sat with her conflicted feelings. Part of her wanted to call Sarah Chen back and explain that there had been a mistake. But another part, the part that had written 15 pages in one sitting, wanted to know if she could actually do this. If she could finish a manuscript and submit it legitimately, and maybe, possibly, actually achieve the dream she'd been too afraid to pursue. She opened her laptop and looked at the chapters she'd been working on. They were raw, emotional, uncomfortably personal. But they were also good, maybe the best writing she'd ever done. Elena made a decision. She would finish this story. Not for Luca, not for Sarah Chen, but for herself. To prove she could do it. And when it was done, she'd submit it properly and let her work speak for itself. She had 3 weeks before her savings ran out completely. 3 weeks to write a novel that might change everything. Elena cracked her knuckles and started typing. The art gallery opening that evening was in a converted warehouse in the South End, all exposed brick and industrial lighting. Elena wore a simple gray dress, her only good pair of heels, and tried not to feel underdressed as Luca guided her through crowds of people who looked like they'd stepped out of fashion magazines. "You're nervous," Luca murmured, his hand warm at the small of her back. "Everyone's staring. Let them." He'd said those words before, at the gala, but this time they carried different weight. This time Elena knew what it meant to stand beside him, to be seen as his. "You look beautiful." The photography exhibition featured stark black and white images of urban decay and renewal, buildings mid-demolition, construction workers silhouetted against dawn skies, neighborhoods caught between what they were and what they were becoming. Elena found herself drawn in despite her nerves. The photographer grew up in Dorchester, Luca explained, steering her toward a particularly striking image of a condemned brownstone with light streaming through broken windows. "She's documenting the changes in the city, the gentrification, the loss of community. It's powerful work." "You know her?" "I've demolished some of these buildings." His voice held complicated emotion. "She hates me, actually, thinks I'm part of the problem, destroying neighborhoods for profit. Are you?" Luca was quiet for a moment. "Sometimes, yes. I try to build affordable housing, to preserve community spaces, but at the end of the day, I'm still part of the machine that prices people out of their homes. There's no way to develop real estate in this city without being complicit in displacement." Elena heard the guilt in his voice, the awareness of his own contradictions. "Is that why you fund community centers? Atonement?" "Partially. Also because I remember being a kid in Eastie with nowhere safe to go after school. My mother was working 2 jobs. My father was—" He stopped. "Busy. I spent hours in a community center that probably saved my life. I want other kids to have that." Before Elena could respond, a woman's voice cut through the gallery noise. "Well, well, Luca Moretti slumming with the art crowd. Should I alert the fire exits?" Elena turned to find a striking woman in her 40s, dark hair streaked with silver, wearing paint-stained jeans and an expensive leather jacket. Her eyes were sharp, assessing. "Yara." Luca's tone was carefully neutral. "Your work is exceptional as always." "Don't patronize me. You're only here because—" Yara's eyes shifted to Elena, and her expression changed to something like curiosity. "Who's this? Your latest acquisition?" Elena bristled, but Luca's hand tightened slightly at her back, a warning to let him handle this. "This is Elena Carter. Elena Yara Kassab, the photographer whose work is making us all uncomfortable in the best possible way. Carter, Yara studied Elena with disconcerting intensity. You're not his usual type. What's his usual type? Elena asked before she could stop herself. Trophy girlfriends who don't ask questions and look good at fundraisers. Yara's smile was sharp. You look like you ask a lot of questions. I do, Elena confirmed, and I'm not a trophy. That earned her a genuine laugh from Yara. Good. Maybe you'll civilize him. She turned back to Luca. I heard about the Fairmont. Constantine's making moves. Not here, Luca said quietly. Why not? Everyone knows what you are, Luca. Might as well own it. Yara gestured at her photographs. These buildings you demolished? 3 families displaced from this one. 2 from that one. An entire community scattered because you decided that plot of land was worth more as luxury condos than affordable housing. I built replacement housing in Brockton, 20 miles away. You think that helps the grandmother who's lived on Blue Hill Avenue for 40 years? Yara's voice rose. You can't gentrify with a conscience, Luca. You're either part of the problem or part of the solution. You can't be both. Elena watched the exchange, fascinated despite the tension. This was a different side of Luca's world. Not violence and crime, but the quieter destruction of development and displacement. You're right, Luca said, and Yara blinked in surprise. I can't be both, but I'm trying to lean toward solution more than problem. That's the best I can offer. Yara studied him for a long moment, then shook her head. At least you're honest about it. She looked at Elena. Watch yourself with this one. He's got more guilt than the Charles has water, and guilt makes people do stupid things. She walked away, leaving Elena and Luca in uncomfortable silence. Sorry about that, Luca said finally. Yara and I have history. What kind of history? The complicated kind. Her brother worked for me years ago, got caught in crossfire between my people and a rival crew. He survived, but Luca's jaw tightened. He's paralyzed from the waist down. I pay for his care, his physical therapy, everything, but money doesn't fix that kind of damage. Elena felt the weight of it, the accumulated cost of Luca's choices. Does she blame you? She should. I do. He turned to face her. Do you want to leave? I know this isn't the normal evening I promised. Actually, I want to see more of the photographs. And then I want you to tell me about the buildings you're working on now, the ones you're trying to get right. Something in Luca's expression softened. You really want to hear about that? I really do. They spent another hour at the gallery, and Luca told her about the mixed-use development in Dorchester, the affordable housing project in Roxbury, the community center design he'd been working on for months. Elena heard the passion in his voice, saw the way his hands moved as he described structural elements and design choices. This was the architect he'd wanted to be, still fighting to exist inside the developer he'd become. When they finally left, the October night had turned cold. Luca shrugged out of his jacket and draped it over Elena's shoulders without asking. The gesture was automatic, protective, and Elena found she didn't mind as much as she thought she would. Where to now? She asked. Or are you taking me home like a gentleman? I'm many things, but gentleman might be a stretch. Luca's eyes held heat. There's a place I want to show you, if you're willing. My actual home, not the penthouse. Elena's pulse quickened. Your home? On the coast, north of the city. It's where I go when I need quiet, when I need to remember who I am underneath everything else. He caught her hand. I want you to see it, but only if you're comfortable. No pressure, no expectations. I can have you back in the city within an hour if you want. Elena thought about her apartment, her manuscript waiting, the sensible choice to keep boundaries clear. Then she thought about wanting to know all of Luca, not just the polished version he showed the world. Okay, she said. Show me. They drove north on Route 1, through towns that grew smaller and quieter as they left the city behind. Luca drove with one hand, the other tangled with Elena's fingers, and they talked about small things, favorite books, worst jobs, childhood memories. The conversation was easy, comfortable, so different from the intensity of their first encounters. After 45 minutes, Luca turned onto a private road that wound through pine trees. The house that emerged from the darkness was nothing like Elena expected. Not a mansion, but a modern structure of wood and glass that seemed to grow organically from the rocky coastline. Floor-to-ceiling windows revealed the ocean beyond, moonlight painting the water silver. "This is yours?" Elena breathed. "I designed it." Pride touched his voice. "Took 3 years to build. It's the only thing I've created that's completely mine, untouched by my father's legacy or the family business." Inside, the house was warm and minimalist. Natural wood floors, clean lines, furniture that looked comfortable rather than expensive. But what caught Elena's attention was the wall of bookshelves in the main room, packed with volumes that showed signs of actual reading, cracked spines, dog-eared pages, notes in margins. "You read all of these?" She moved to the shelves, trailing fingers along spines. "Most of them. Some are my mother's. I couldn't get rid of them after she died." Luca moved to the kitchen, visible through an open archway. "Wine? Or I can make coffee if you'd prefer." "Wine is good." Elena explored while he poured, taking in the details that revealed the man who lived here. Architectural drawings framed on walls, a worn leather chair positioned to face the ocean, a drafting table in the corner covered with sketches. This wasn't a showpiece like the penthouse. This was a home. Luca returned with 2 glasses of red wine and gestured toward the deck. "The view is better outside." They stepped through sliding doors onto a wide deck with stairs leading down to the beach. The ocean stretched endless before them, waves rhythmic and eternal. Elena sipped her wine and let the peace of the place settle into her bones. "I understand why you come here," she said quietly. "It's like the world stops at those trees." "That's exactly it." Luca stood close, not touching but present. No business, no obligations, no ghosts. Just this. They stood in comfortable silence, listening to the waves. Then Elena asked the question that had been building all evening. "What happens with Constantine?" "Really?" Luca's shoulders tensed. "I was wondering when you'd ask that." "You promised honesty." "I did." He took a long drink of wine. "He wants territory I won't give him, access to shipping routes I control, warehouses I own. If I give in, he uses them for trafficking. If I don't, he escalates until one of us is dead or destroyed. Those are the only options." In his world, yes. He sees negotiation as weakness, compromise as defeat. Men like Constantine, they only understand power and violence. Luca's voice was flat, factual. "So I'm preparing for war, quietly, carefully, but preparing nonetheless." Elena's stomach tightened. "War means people die." "Yes." "Including you?" "Possibly." He finally looked at her, and the honesty in his eyes was brutal. "I have good people, better resources, and I'm smarter than Constantine. But that doesn't guarantee anything. Violence is unpredictable. People get hurt who shouldn't. Innocent bystanders caught in crossfire. Like Yara's brother." "Exactly like Yara's brother." Luca set down his wine glass. "This is why I shouldn't have pursued you, Elena. Why I should have let you walk away after that first night. Because now you're connected to me, and if something happens, stop." Elena turned to face him fully. "Stop trying to protect me from my own choices. I chose to be here. I chose to know the truth. I'm choosing to stay despite knowing what might happen. You don't get to take that agency away from me. Even if that choice gets you killed? Even then. Because the alternative is living half a life, always wondering what if, always choosing safety over everything else." Her voice strengthened. "I've done that for 28 years, Luca. I'm done being afraid." Luca stared at her, something like wonder and despair warring in his expression. "You're extraordinary, you know that?" "I'm stubborn. There's a difference." "No, you're brave in a way I've never been." He reached up, tucked a strand of hair behind her ear with infinite gentleness. "I've faced violence, survived attempts on my life, made impossible choices. But standing here, being honest with you, letting you see all of me, that terrifies me more than any of it." Elena's heart squeezed. "Why?" "Because violence I understand. Business I can navigate, but this—" His hand moved to cup her face. "Caring about someone enough that losing them would break me? I don't know how to survive that kind of vulnerability." "Maybe you're not supposed to survive it. Maybe you're supposed to just feel it, risk it, see what happens." Luca's thumb traced her cheekbone. "When did you get so wise?" "About 5 minutes ago. I'm improvising." He laughed, that rare, genuine sound that transformed him, then pulled her close. Elena went willingly, wrapping her arms around his waist and resting her head against his chest. His heart beat steady and strong beneath her ear. They stood like that for a long time, wrapped in each other while the ocean sang its ancient song. Elena felt something shift inside her, some final wall crumbling. This was more than attraction, more than the dangerous thrill of choosing the wrong man. This was connection, the kind that reached past logic into something fundamental and true. "Stay tonight," Luca murmured into her hair. I'm not asking for anything except your presence. I have guest rooms, plenty of space. I just want to wake up knowing you're here." Elena should have said no, should have maintained boundaries, kept some distance. Instead, she nodded against his chest. "Okay." They went inside, and Luca showed her to a guest room with an ocean view and an ensuite bathroom stocked with everything she might need. He kissed her forehead, gentle and chaste, then left her alone. Elena changed into borrowed pajamas and climbed into bed. But sleep wouldn't come. Her mind spun with everything that had happened, everything she was feeling. After an hour of restless tossing, she gave up and padded quietly down the hall. Luca's bedroom door was open, revealing him sitting on his bed, shirtless, staring at a tablet. He looked up when she appeared, surprise and concern crossing his face. "Can't sleep?" he asked. "Too much in my head." Elena hovered in the doorway. Would it be okay if I just stayed in here? I don't mean, come here." Luca set aside the tablet and pulled back the covers on the far side of the bed. "I promise to be a perfect gentleman." Elena climbed in, and Luca turned off the light, plunging them into darkness, broken only by moonlight through the windows. They lay on their backs, not touching, listening to each other breathe. "Thank you," Elena said quietly, "for showing me this place, for being honest, for not pushing. Thank you for trusting me enough to stay." More silence, comfortable and charged at once. Then Elena rolled onto her side, facing him. "Luca?" "Yes?" "I'm falling for you, and it scares me." She felt more than saw him turn toward her. His hand found hers in the darkness, fingers intertwining. "I'm already fallen, and it terrifies me." Elena moved closer, and Luca's arms came around her, tucking her against his chest. She felt his lips brush her temple, felt the steady rhythm of his breathing, and let herself relax into the shelter of his body. This was dangerous, foolish, reckless, but it was also exactly where she wanted to be. She fell asleep to the sound of his heartbeat and the ocean's eternal rhythm. Elena woke to sunlight streaming through unfamiliar windows and a moment of disorientation before memory returned. Luca's bed, his coastal home, his arms around her through the night. But the space beside her was empty now, the sheets cool. She sat up, listening. Voices drifted from somewhere deeper in the house, tense and urgent. Elena pulled on the borrowed robe she found hanging on the bathroom door and followed the sound. Luca stood in the kitchen, phone pressed to his ear, his expression dark. He wore only sleep pants, and Elena noticed for the first time the scars on his torso, pale lines that spoke of old violence. "When?" Luca demanded into the phone. A pause. "No, keep her there. I'm on my way." He hung up and finally noticed Elena watching. His expression shifted immediately, violence smoothing into concern. "I'm sorry. Did we wake you?" "What's wrong?" Luca rubbed his face, and Elena saw the exhaustion there, the weight he carried. "That was Antonio. There was an incident at one of my properties last night, a fire. We think it was Constantine sending another message." "Was anyone hurt?" "No, the building was empty, scheduled for demolition anyway. But the message is clear, he's escalating." Luca moved to the coffee maker, movements sharp with controlled anger. "I need to get back to the city, deal with this." "I'll come with you." "Elena, don't." She crossed to him. "Don't try to protect me by pushing me away. I told you, I'm in this. That means the good parts and the difficult ones." Luca looked at her for a long moment, then pulled her close, burying his face in her hair. "I don't want you anywhere near this." "I know, but I'm already near it. I've been near it since that first night." Elena pulled back to look at him. "Let me be part of your life, Luca. All of it." He kissed her then, deep and desperate, like he was drowning and she was air. When they broke apart, his forehead rested against hers. You undo me, Elena Carter. Good. You needed undoing. They drove back to Boston in tense silence, Luca's jaw tight, his hands gripping the steering wheel. Elena watched the landscape pass and tried not to think about what war between men like Luca and Constantine might look like. When they reached the city, Luca didn't take her to the penthouse or her apartment. Instead, they went to the burned property, a warehouse in South Boston that still smoked, fire trucks parked outside, investigators combing through wreckage. Antonio met them at the perimeter, his expression grim. Accelerant used. Professional job. They wanted to make sure it burned. Security footage? Luca's voice was deadly calm. Disabled. They knew what they were doing. Antonio's eyes flicked to Elena, uncertain. She stays, Luca said firmly. Tell me everything. Elena listened as Antonio detailed the fire, the investigation, the police report being filed. The language was technical, clinical, but underneath ran currents of violence and threat. This was a warning shot, not the war itself. He wants a meeting, Antonio said finally. Constantine says he's willing to negotiate if you are. Luca laughed, bitter and sharp. Negotiate. He burns my property, then wants to negotiate. It's a power play, showing he can hurt you whenever he wants. And if I don't meet with him? More escalation, worse targets next time. Antonio glanced at Elena again. Maybe people instead of buildings. Elena felt cold settle in her stomach. This was about more than territory or business now. This was personal, dangerous in ways she was only beginning to understand. Luca was quiet for a long moment, staring at the smoking ruins. Then he turned to Antonio. Set up the meeting, neutral ground, public place. I want eyes everywhere. Luca. Antonio's voice held warning. I know the risks. Do it anyway. Luca's hand found Elena's. But first, I'm taking Elena somewhere safe. I don't need... Elena started. Please. Luca looked at her, and the raw fear in his eyes silenced her protests. Just for a few hours while I handle this. Please, Elena. She nodded, seeing how much the request cost him, how much he needed her to agree. Antonio drove them to a building in Cambridge, luxury condos with tight security. Luca used a key card to access a unit on the top floor, spacious and impersonal. Safe house, he explained. No one knows about it except my innermost circle. You'll be protected here. Two men materialized from somewhere, clearly security. Luca spoke to them in rapid Italian, then turned back to Elena. They'll stay outside. Anything you need, just ask. I'll be back as soon as the meeting's done. How long will that be? Couple hours, maybe more. He pulled her close. I need you to promise me something. What? If something happens, if I don't come back or if things go wrong, you take the money in that safe, he pointed to a panel in the wall, and you disappear. New city, new life. Antonio knows people who can help. Elena's throat tightened. Nothing's going to happen. Promise me anyway. Luca. Elena. Please. She saw the desperation there, the need for this small reassurance. I promise. But you're coming back. I'm coming back, he agreed, then kissed her hard and fast before forcing himself to pull away. I love you. I should have said that before. I love you. Then he was gone, the door closing behind him, leaving Elena alone with her racing heart and the echo of words she'd never expected to hear. She moved to the window, looking out at Cambridge spreading below. Somewhere out there, Luca was walking into a meeting that could end in violence, in death, in everything falling apart. Elena thought about her manuscript waiting, about the agent who wanted to see her work, about the life she'd been building before Luca crashed into it. She thought about walking away, using that money in the safe to start fresh somewhere. Constantine and burning warehouses couldn't reach her. But she'd meant what she said. She was done being afraid, done choosing safety over everything else. So instead of planning her escape, Elena pulled out her phone and called the one person she thought might actually understand. This is Yara, the photographer answered. It's Elena Carter. We met last night at your opening. I need your help. A pause. What kind of help? The kind that involves understanding men like Luca Moretti and surviving the worlds they inhabit. Another pause, longer this time. Then, where are you? I'm coming to you. Yara arrived 20 minutes later, somehow bypassing Luca's security with a confidence that suggested she'd done this before. She swept into the safe house carrying coffee and a knowing expression that made Elena feel simultaneously grateful and exposed. So, Yara said, settling onto the sofa with the ease of someone comfortable anywhere. Luca's got you stashed in a safe house while he plays dangerous games with the Russian mob. How very predictable of him. Elena accepted the coffee, needing something to do with her hands. He's trying to protect me. He's trying to control the situation. There's a difference. Yara's sharp eyes assessed her. The question is, are you going to let him keep you locked away like a precious thing that might break? Or are you going to do something about it? What could I possibly do? I don't know anything about his world, about how any of this works. You know him. That's more than most people can say. Yara took a long sip of coffee. My brother, the one Luca's been paying for, he used to say that Luca's biggest weakness is that he thinks he has to carry everything alone. Never asks for help, never trusts anyone completely. It makes him strong but also predictable. Elena thought about Luca's face when he'd said he loved her, the desperation beneath the words. He told me he loves me, right before he left. Of course he did. Men like Luca always confess their feelings when they think they might die. Yara's voice was dry but not unkind. The question is what you do with that information. I don't understand what you want from me. Yara leaned forward. I want you to understand that sitting here waiting for him to come back or not come back, that's not partnership. That's being managed. If you really love him, if you really want to be part of his life, you need to stop letting him make all the decisions about your safety, your role, your future. He's meeting with Constantine right now. What am I supposed to do about that? Figure out what you bring to this situation that Luca can't see because he's too busy trying to protect you. Yara pulled out her phone. My brother still has contacts in that world. People who know things. If you want to actually help instead of just waiting to see if your boyfriend survives the day, I can make some calls. Elena's heart raced. What kind of help? The kind that requires you to be smart, careful, and willing to take risks. The kind that might actually make a difference. Yara's expression was challenging. Or you can stay here, drink coffee, and hope everything works out. Your choice. Elena thought about the woman she'd been 2 weeks ago, afraid to submit her writing, drowning in debt, living half a life. She thought about dancing with Luca under crystal chandeliers and choosing courage over safety. She thought about his words from that first night. You're brave in a way I've never been. Make the calls, Elena said. Yara smiled, fierce and approving. Now we're talking. While Yara worked her phone, speaking rapid Arabic to contacts Elena couldn't begin to identify, Elena's own phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. The meeting is at the Seaport Hotel, Harbor View Room, 3 p.m. If you care about Luca Moretti, you'll want to be there. A friend. Elena showed it to Yara, who read it and nodded slowly. Someone wants you involved. The question is why? Could it be a trap? Could be. Could also be someone in Luca's organization who thinks having you present might actually prevent violence. Yara checked her watch. It's 1:30 now. If we're going to do this, we need to move fast. If we're going to do what, exactly? Yara's smile was sharp. Crash a mob negotiation and hope we don't get killed. You in? Elena thought about Luca's face when he'd begged her to promise she'd run if things went wrong. Thought about his conviction that keeping her separate from his world would keep her safe. Thought about her own words to him. I won't be hidden. I'll stand beside you, or I won't stand there at all. I'm in. Getting past Luca's security required creativity. Yara called in a favor from someone who owed her brother, and suddenly there was a delivery that needed Elena's signature downstairs. The moment the guard stepped out to intercept it, Elena and Yara slipped out through the service entrance. Luca is going to kill me for this, Elena muttered as they hurried toward Yara's car. Only if he survives Constantine. Priorities. They reached the Seaport Hotel at 2:45. The Harbor View room was on the 3rd floor, and as they approached, Elena saw men positioned at intervals, security clearly, though they wore suits instead of uniforms. Some she recognized from Luca's organization. Others had harder faces, cold eyes that marked them as Constantine's people. We can't just walk in there, Elena said. No, but we can get close enough to see what's happening. Yara pulled her toward a service corridor. My brother used to work security at events, taught me all the back doors. They found a locked door that Yara somehow picked with a hairpin and confidence, emerging into a catering prep area adjacent to the harbor view room. Through a narrow window, Elena could see into the meeting space. Luca sat at a long table, Antonio beside him, two other men Elena didn't recognize flanking them. Across the table sat a man who had to be Constantine, pale, lean, with eyes like winter ice. He had three men with him, all radiating controlled violence. Elena couldn't hear what they were saying, but she could read body language. Constantine was relaxed, almost amused. Luca was rigidly controlled, every muscle tense. This wasn't a negotiation. This was Constantine enjoying his power while Luca fought to maintain composure. "This is bad," Yara whispered. "Constantine's playing with him." Elena watched as Constantine said something that made his men laugh. Luca's expression didn't change, but his hands clenched into fists. Antonio leaned in, murmuring something, but Luca shook his head once, sharp. Then Constantine pulled out a photograph and slid it across the table. Even from a distance, Elena recognized herself. The photo was from the art gallery the previous night, her and Luca standing close, his hand at her back. Someone had been watching them. "Oh no," Elena breathed. Constantine was talking now, gesturing at the photo, and Elena saw the moment Luca's control cracked. He stood abruptly, violence radiating from every line of his body. Antonio grabbed his arm, holding him back, while Constantine just smiled. "He's threatening you," Yara said, "using you as leverage." Elena's blood ran cold. This was exactly what Luca had feared, exactly why he'd tried to keep her separate from his world. By choosing to be with him, she'd handed his enemies a weapon. Constantine stood now, still smiling, and said something else. Luca's response was immediate and sharp, his voice carrying even through the glass. "Touch her, and I'll burn everything you love to ash." Constantine's smile widened. He said something that made his men tense, hands moving toward weapons. Luca's people mirrored the movement, the room balanced on a knife's edge, seconds from exploding into violence. Elena didn't think. She simply moved. "Elena, wait!" Yara grabbed for her, but Elena was already through the door, into the meeting room, her presence shattering the tableau like a stone through glass. Every head turned, every hand on every weapon froze. "Elena!" Luca's voice was strangled. "What are you doing here?" She walked toward him with a confidence she didn't feel, her heart hammering so hard she thought everyone must hear it. "What I should have done from the beginning, standing beside you instead of hiding." "This is private meeting," Constantine said, his accent thick, his ice-chip eyes assessing her. "You should leave, little girl, before you get hurt." "I'm not leaving." Elena reached Luca's side and his hand immediately found hers, gripping tight enough to hurt. "And I'm not a little girl. I'm Elena Carter, and I'm here because whatever threats you're making against me, I'd rather hear them directly." Constantine laughed, genuinely delighted. "Oh, Luca, she has spine. I did not expect this." "Elena, please." Luca's voice was low, desperate. "Go back to the safe house. Let me handle this." "No." She looked up at him, saw the fear in his eyes, the barely controlled panic. "You told me you loved me. You told me you wanted me in your actual life. This is your actual life, so I'm here." "Touching," Constantine said, his smile turning cruel. "Young love. So pure, so innocent. It would be shame to destroy it." Elena forced herself to look at him directly. "Then don't." "Don't?" Constantine's eyebrows rose. "And why should I not? This man," he gestured at Luca, "he refuses to give me what I want. He blocks my business, costs me money, acts like he is better than me because he funds community centers and builds pretty buildings. So I must teach him a lesson about consequences. By hurting people who have nothing to do with your dispute?" Elena's voice was steady, though she felt anything but. "That's not power. That's cowardice." The room went absolutely silent. Antonio made a choked sound. Constantine's men tensed, waiting for his signal. Constantine stared at her, and Elena saw the moment his amusement shifted into something darker. "You have courage, I give you that. Foolish courage, but courage nonetheless. It's not foolish to stand by someone you love. It's not foolish to refuse to be used as a weapon against him. Elena squeezed Luca's hand, drawing strength from the connection. You want to intimidate Luca by threatening me, but I'm not afraid of you. And even if I were, I wouldn't let that fear make me run. Elena? Luca's voice broke. She is magnificent, Constantine said to Luca. I understand now why you risk everything for her, but this changes nothing. You still refuse to give me what I want, so consequences must follow. Then let them follow me. Elena's words surprised even herself. Whatever consequences you think Luca deserves, take them out on me. Leave his businesses alone. Leave his people alone. I'm the one who made this complicated by choosing him, so I'm the one who should pay the price. No. Luca's voice was granite. Absolutely not. Elena, stop talking. That is interesting proposal, Constantine interrupted, leaning forward. You offer yourself as, what, hostage? Bargaining chip? I offer myself as proof that threatening me won't work, that I'm not leveraged because I'm making my own choices. Elena's mind raced, putting pieces together. You want Luca to give you access to his shipping routes, his warehouses? You want to use them for trafficking. But if he agrees, he becomes complicit in human suffering. And if he refuses, you hurt people until he breaks. Either way, you win. Smart girl, you understand the game. It's not a game. These are people's lives. Elena thought about Yara's photographs, about displaced families and communities destroyed. What if there was a third option? One where Luca doesn't have to choose between his morals and protecting the people he loves, and you still get what you actually need? Constantine tilted his head, curious. I am listening. Elena, don't, Luca started, but she cut him off. What do you really want, Mr. Constantine? Not the territorial disputes, not the power plays. What's the actual business need you're trying to fill? Constantine studied her for a long moment. I need shipping capacity, routes to move legitimate cargo, electronics, textiles, goods that make money without making headlines. But all routes are controlled by families like Moretti's. They keep me out because of my reputation. So your reputation is the problem, not your actual business needs. Elena looked at Luca. What if you gave him access to routes for legitimate cargo only? Strict oversight, regular inspections, immediate termination if anything illegal is found. He gets the capacity he needs, you get to maintain your moral standards, and nobody has to burn buildings or threaten people. The room was silent. Then Antonio spoke carefully. That could actually work, if we structure it right, with third-party auditing. You would trust me to honor such agreement? Constantine asked, his tone skeptical. No, Elena said bluntly. But I'd trust legal contracts with massive penalties for violations. I'd trust independent oversight. And I'd trust that legitimate business is more profitable than constantly being at war. Luca stared at her like he was seeing her for the first time. You're serious. I'm serious. Elena turned back to Constantine. Your problem isn't that Luca won't deal with you. It's that he won't compromise his ethics. But if you're actually willing to operate legitimately, there's no ethical problem, just business. Constantine was quiet for a long moment, his ice-chip eyes moving between Elena and Luca. Finally, he laughed, a real laugh that transformed his cold features into something almost human. You bring amateur negotiator to meeting, Luca, and she solves problem we have been fighting over for months. Is embarrassing for both of us, yes? Is it a solution you'd accept? Luca's voice was careful. If terms are right, if oversight is real, if penalties for violation are severe enough to matter. Constantine shrugged. I am businessman, not monster. I prefer profit to violence. Violence is expensive, bad for business. This solution, it has merit. Antonio pulled out a tablet, already pulling up contract templates. We could draft preliminary terms right now. Have lawyers finalized by end of week. Over the next 2 hours, Elena watched as the meeting transformed from standoff to negotiation. Constantine and Luca hammered out terms while lawyers joined via video conference. Elena sat beside Luca the entire time, his hand never leaving hers, his presence solid and grounding. When Constantine finally stood to leave, contract preliminaries agreed upon, he paused by Elena's chair. You have saved both our lives today, I think. Perhaps many lives. This is not small thing. I just want to build a life with him, Elena said simply. I can't do that if he's constantly at war. Constantine nodded slowly. You are good for him. Make him remember there are solutions besides violence. This is valuable. He looked at Luca. You are a lucky man, Moretti. Do not waste this gift. Then he was gone, his men following, and Elena finally allowed herself to breathe. The moment the door closed, Luca pulled her into his arms so tightly she could barely breathe. Don't ever do that again. Don't ever put yourself in danger like that. I thought I was going to watch you die, Elena. I thought, I'm okay. We're okay. Elena held him just as tightly. It worked. You could have been killed. He could have... Luca pulled back just enough to look at her, and his eyes were wet. How did you even get here? You were supposed to be safe. Yara helped me, and someone sent me a text telling me where to find you. Antonio cleared his throat. That would be me. I apologize for going behind your back, Luca, but I thought... He hesitated. I thought maybe having her here would remind you that not everything has to be solved with violence. I didn't expect her to actually negotiate a solution. Luca looked at his second-in-command for a long moment, then nodded. We'll discuss your insubordination later, but thank you for keeping her safe while she was being recklessly brilliant. Elena laughed, slightly hysterical with relief and adrenaline crash. I can't believe that worked. You can't believe... Luca shook his head, something between exasperation and wonder on his face. You walked into a room full of armed men and convinced a Russian mobster to accept a legitimate business deal. How are you this brave? I'm not brave, I'm terrified. But I love you, and I wasn't going to let fear keep me from fighting for us. Elena cupped his face. You told me once that I was brave in a way you've never been. Today, I finally believed it. Luca kissed her then, deep and desperate, in front of Antonio and the security team and anyone else who cared to watch. When they finally broke apart, he rested his forehead against hers. Marry me. Elena blinked. What? Marry me. Be my partner in everything. Help me figure out how to build instead of destroy. Keep saving me from my own worst instincts. Marry me, Elena. You're proposing in a hotel meeting room right after negotiating with the Russian mob? I'm proposing wherever I can before you come to your senses and run. Luca's smile was shaky. I don't have a ring. I don't have a plan. I just know that I love you and I want you beside me for everything that comes next. Will you marry me? Elena should have asked for time to think, should have pointed out they'd known each other for less than 2 weeks, should have been practical, sensible, careful. Instead, she said, yes. Luca's expression transformed into pure joy. He kissed her again, spinning her around while Antonio and the security team applauded. When he set her down, both of them were laughing and crying at once. We're insane, Elena said. Completely, Luca agreed. Is it too late to change your mind? Absolutely. You're stuck with me now. Thank God. 6 months later, Elena stood in Luca's coastal home, looking out at the ocean while she adjusted the simple white dress she'd chosen for their small ceremony. Yara was with her, making final adjustments to Elena's hair while providing running commentary. I still can't believe you're actually going through with this, Yara said, though her tone was fond. Marrying the man who literally has the Russian mob on his payroll now. Legitimate business partner, Elena corrected. The oversight system is actually working. Constantine's been clean for 6 months. Wonders never cease. Yara stepped back, assessing her work. You look beautiful. Luca's going to lose his mind. Elena smiled at her reflection. The past 6 months had been a whirlwind of change. She'd finished her manuscript, a story about a woman who fell in love with a dangerous man and helped him find redemption. Sarah Chen had sold it in a 3-book deal that finally erased Elena's debt and gave her a career as an actual author. Luca had kept his promise about honesty, including her in business decisions, showing her the full scope of his world, the legitimate and the complicated. Together, they'd started a foundation that funded arts programs and affordable housing, using his resources to create rather than destroy. The community center in Dorchester had broken ground 3 months ago. Elena had been there for the ceremony, watching Luca's face as he saw his designs become reality. That was the man she'd fallen in love with. The architect, the dreamer, the person trying to build something meaningful from the ruins of his father's legacy. You ready? Yara asked. Elena took a breath, looking out at the ocean one last time as an unmarried woman. Then she nodded. I'm ready. The ceremony was small, just 20 people on the beach, the ocean providing music. Luca's sister Sophia had flown in from California, cautiously optimistic about her brother's transformation. Antonio stood as best man, looking uncomfortable in a suit, but genuinely happy. Yara's brother was there in his wheelchair, having forgiven Luca enough to witness this day. And Luca stood at the water's edge in a dark suit, no tie, waiting for her with an expression that made Elena's heart soar. As she walked toward him across the sand, she thought about the terrified woman who'd attended a charity gala and wanted to leave before she even arrived. That woman felt like a stranger now. This Elena, the one walking toward her future with clear eyes and steady steps, she knew exactly what she was choosing. Not perfection, not safety, but partnership, growth. The courage to keep choosing love even when it was complicated. When she reached Luca, he took her hands and whispered, "You're stunning. You're not bad yourself." The officiant began the ceremony, but Elena barely heard the words. She was too focused on Luca's face, on the way he looked at her like she'd hung the moon, on the future they were building together. When it came time for vows, Luca spoke first. Elena, you walked into my life and refused to accept the man I thought I had to be. You saw who I could become and loved me enough to help me get there. You're brave and brilliant and recklessly honest, and you make me want to be worthy of you. I promise to never hide from you, to never make decisions without you, to stand beside you as your equal. I promise to keep building instead of destroying, and I promise to love you with everything I am for as long as I live. Elena's turn. Luca, you terrified me. You still terrify me sometimes. But you also showed me that courage isn't the absence of fear. It's choosing to move forward despite it. You taught me to finish what I start, to trust my own strength, to demand more from life than safety and comfort. I promise to be honest with you, even when it's hard. I promise to stand beside you in your world, not behind you or separate from it. And I promise to love you through the complicated parts, the difficult choices, the moments when we disagree. Because choosing you means choosing all of it. They exchanged rings, simple platinum bands that meant more than any diamond. When the officiant pronounced them married, Luca kissed her like they were the only two people in the world, and Elena knew with absolute certainty that she'd made the right choice. The reception was dinner on the deck, wine flowing freely, toasts that ranged from heartfelt to teasing. As the sun set over the ocean, painting the sky in shades of amber and rose, Luca pulled Elena close for a dance. No crystal chandeliers this time, he murmured. Don't need them. I have you. Sentimental, but his voice was warm. They swayed together, the ocean singing its eternal song, surrounded by people who'd become family. Elena caught Yara's eye across the deck and received a nod of approval. Caught Sophia watching her brother with cautious hope. What are you thinking? Luca asked. That 6 months ago I was drowning in debt and unfinished stories, afraid of everything. And now I'm here, married to you, with a book deal and a future I actually want to live. Elena looked up at him. You changed my life. No. Luca's hand tightened at her waist. You changed your own life. I just got lucky enough to be part of it. We changed each other. That's more accurate, he spun her gently. So what comes next for us, Mrs. Moretti? Elena smiled at the name, still getting used to it. I finished the second book in my contract. You finished the community center. We keep working with Constantine's oversight committee. We build the life we want instead of accepting the one we were handed. Sounds perfect. Sounds complicated. Even better. Luca stopped dancing, just holding her close. I love you, Elena. Thank you for choosing me, for choosing us. I'd choose you again, Elena said simply, every single time. They stood together as the sun disappeared below the horizon, as stars began to emerge in the darkening sky. The past 6 months had been challenging, beautiful, terrifying, and real in ways Elena had never experienced. The future would be the same, no guarantees, no safety nets, just two people committed to building something meaningful together. Elena thought about the hook she'd written for her novel, the opening line that had captured Sarah Chen's attention. The bullet shattered the champagne flute before she even heard the shot. That was where her story with Luca had begun, in violence and danger, and the kind of fear that changes everything. But this was where their real story started. Not in the drama of that first night, but in the choice to wake up every morning and keep choosing each other, to build community centers and write novels, to forgive past mistakes and create better futures, to stand together not because it was easy, but because it was worth it. Months later, at her book launch party in a small Boston bookstore, Elena signed copies of The Stories We Tell Ourselves, while Luca stood nearby, pride evident on his face. Readers asked where she got her inspiration, and she smiled and said simply, "From learning to be brave enough to write the story I was living." That night, in their shared apartment overlooking the harbor, midway between the coastal home and the penthouse, a compromise that felt like theirs, Elena worked on her second book while Luca sketched designs for a new affordable housing project. They worked in comfortable silence, occasionally looking up to catch each other's eye and smile. This was partnership. This was what they'd built from chaos and danger and the reckless choice to love despite every reason not to. Not perfect, not simple, but absolutely, completely theirs. And when Luca finally set aside his drawings and pulled Elena from her laptop into his arms, when they stood at their window looking out at the city lights reflecting on dark water, Elena knew with bone-deep certainty that she'd never choose safety over this. Never choose comfort over the messy, complicated, beautiful reality of loving someone deeply enough to transform each other. "What are you thinking?" Luca asked, his question an echo of their wedding dance. Elena smiled against his chest. "That I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be." "With me?" "With you. In this life we're building, choosing courage every single day." Luca kissed the top of her head. "Let them watch." Elena laughed, remembering those words from their first dance, from the moment everything changed. Let them watch indeed, because what they'd built together wasn't power or wealth, or the dangerous thrill of loving the wrong person. It was devotion forged in truth, risk, and unwavering choice. It was partnership between equals who'd learned to build instead of hide, to stand together instead of apart. It was love, complicated and challenging and absolutely worth fighting for. And in the end, that was the only story that mattered. Not how they'd found each other in violence and fear, but how they'd chosen to keep finding each other every day after. How they'd taken broken pieces and built something whole. How they'd refused to let fear make their choices for them. Elena Carter Moretti, former struggling writer, now published author and equal partner to a reformed developer, stood in her husband's arms and felt completely, perfectly alive. She belonged in this world not because she was taken into it, but because she'd stepped into it willingly, with eyes open and heart brave. And as Luca once said on that first night, when everything was dangerous and new and terrifyingly uncertain, let them watch. Because what they built together was theirs alone. A story of redemption and courage, and choosing love even when it was the most difficult, most complicated, most beautiful choice of all.